Welcome to Histology. The British Isles have always been thought of as lands filled with great mysteries. Before the Romans arrived, they were even seen as magical. But once Rome took control of most of the region, many things began to change. The Latin culture started to spread, and the idea of a monotheistic faith, with a single god ruling over the universe, expanded across Brittany. Yet the old gods of Brittany had not vanished, and their devoted believers and priests were rumored to hold mystical powers. Despite that, Rome's rule over the islands came to an end. The mighty empire collapsed, and a bleak period began in England. The land was consumed by greed and a lust for domination. Family turned against family in a constant struggle for control of the Isles. Towns that once thrived in Roman times fell into decay. The invasion by the Angles and Saxons was seen as a sign that God himself had abandoned those territories. However, a prophecy spoke of two brothers returning to restore light to these lands. These brothers were Ambrosius and Uther Pendragon. They fought against the savage Saxons and also against Vortigern's tyranny. Their valor on the battlefield earned them the crown of Brittany. Ambrosius's reign was brief, leaving his younger brother as the one to shape the country's destiny. Uther Pendragon was hailed as a fearless fighter, though not all nobles fully acknowledged his rule. Uther battled the Saxons for years and enlarged his domain through warfare. The king of Brittany, who had never known romantic longing, found his heart stirred by an unexpected sight. The Duchess Igraine entered the room at her husband's side, Duke Gorlois of Cornwall, and she was the loveliest woman Uther had ever laid eyes on. The Duke introduced his wife to the monarch. Igraine seemed to hail from the fabled Avalon, a place where magic still thrived. At the royal feast, Duke Gorlois noticed that the king's interest in his wife was not at all proper. Igraine told her husband that the king had made a disgraceful proposition to her. Gorlois was enraged, but managed to keep calm until the gathering ended. At daybreak, the duke and his wife left the castle hastily, without a formal farewell. But a guard who witnessed the couple's quick departure alerted Uther at once. Furious, the king sent a messenger to overtake the duke, delivering a letter of royal summons. It ordered that both the duke and duchess appear before him straight away. Uther saw it as a vassal's undeniable duty to obey the king, and disobeying such an order could be labeled treason. The duke, knowing Uther's true aim was to charm Igraine, told the messenger he would not be returning to court due to urgent obligations. Consumed with rage, the king mobilized his soldiers to march on Cornwall and teach the rebellious duke a harsh lesson. Duke Gorlois fortified his stronghold, prepared for battle. Their forces clashed, but the result remained inconclusive. The duke opted to defend himself within his walls, feeling the king lacked the needed strength to break through. Uther then set a siege at Tintagel Castle, where Duke Gorlois and Igraine had taken shelter. The siege went on, showing no sign of ending, as the duke had stocked ample provisions ahead of the king's arrival. Uther was utterly obsessed with Igraine, and the never-ending siege only worsened his mental state. Out of other options, Uther turned to Sir Ulfius, his loyal companion, and said, "There is only one man who can end my torment, and you know who he is. My king, we don't need that devil worshipper. You are Brittany's legitimate ruler, chosen by God." "Yes, I know who I am, but I believe that God is not very inclined to help one of his chosen ones disrespect one of the 10 Commandments." Unhappy, Ulfius galloped to the Welsh lands to enlist the king's old ally. "Who goes there?" "Sir Ulfius, by order of King Uther." "What took you so long? I've been waiting for hours." "You fraud! You won't fool me by pretending you already expected me." "Don't be foolish, Ulfius. I have waited years for the true call of Albion." The king was relieved to see Ulfius return with his companion. "Merlin, old friend, I feared I'd never see that wrinkled face again. Your gray hair shows you haven't been getting any younger yourself." Uther told Merlin he had been distressed since meeting Duchess Igraine, feeling that a troubling desire was consuming him. "I know how you can be with beautiful Igraine, but it will have a price. I'd pay anything for one night with that amazing woman. I will help you, but this union will produce a child, and you must give that child to me. Do you plan to use the child in one of your rites?" "Certainly not. Your Majesty has been spending too many hours with that fool Sir Ulfius." "Speaking of him, we need him. He has a key role in our plot. That evening, Sir Ulfius ordered the royal siege at Tintagel to be lifted, telling the soldiers to head back. From atop the walls, the Duke sensed this as a weakness on the king's part, so he led his knights out to destroy the retreating enemies. Meanwhile, Uther and Merlin hid, waiting for the Duke's departure. The moment has come. Merlin threw aside his cloak and started his incantation. Uther stared in awe and dread as the powerful druid summoned ancient and natural forces. Merlin took a powder from one of his belt pouches and tossed it onto the king. When the dust settled, Uther's face and form appeared identical to the Duke of Cornwall. The king rode to the Duke's fortress. "The Duke has returned. Open the gate." Uther's disguise was flawless. He ordered his horse to remain ready, as he wouldn't stay long. Then he headed upstairs to Igraine's chamber, where she stood holding her daughter, Morgana. The little girl ran to embrace who she assumed was her father. "Daddy's back!" Uther brushed the child away. "Get out, child!" Morgana was taken from the room by a maid, but she felt in her heart that something was off. Uther approached Igraine, who was shocked by the intense look in her husband's eyes. He took Igraine and let his passion flow. They were awakened by Morgana's sobs at dawn. "Daddy is dead! Daddy is dead!" Igraine rushed to comfort her daughter, and Uther seized that chance to leave the fortress. He departed before daybreak, and soon the Duke's troops returned. "Daddy is dead." "Calm down, my dear. We're here for you." As the soldiers neared, Igraine saw them carrying her husband's body. Grief-stricken, she cried out, "My God, how could this be? He fought valiantly and died in battle, my lady." "But how? He visited me last night. How could it be?" "His spirit likely came to say goodbye, my lady." Igraine was led away by her ladies, unable to understand. Not long after, Uther came with his army to Tintagel, claiming to seek terms. The Duchess and her daughters, still in mourning, met the king. Young Morgana glared at Uther with pure hatred. "I want lasting peace between our houses. Through marriage we can unite our families once and for all." In this arrangement, Igraine's heritage would remain safe. Only a few days passed before Uther and Igraine were wed. On their wedding night, she told him she was with child. "So, who is the father?" "The Duke's." "That's what I believed, but now I'm unsure. He stayed away for months. Yet on the night he died, I felt his presence." Uther realized the child was his. The baby came into the world, a healthy, handsome boy. But Merlin soon appeared at Tintagel, ready to claim what was promised. "The time has come, my king. Hand over the baby." Uther tore the boy from his mother's arms as she tried to hold on. "Return my son." Uther passed the child to Merlin. "My lord, please don't give your heir to this wretch. I beg you. I made a bargain, and I must keep it." "Are you blind, Sir Ulfius? I've seen many like you, Merlin, meet their end at the sword of God-fearing knights." "Is that so? You might not be as dim as I thought. Come with me. We have to ensure the future of these islands." Merlin and Sir Ulfius rode out to the lands of a respected knight named Sir Ector. Merlin left the baby with this knight, asking him to raise the child as his own. "Look after him, Sir Ector. The fate of our kingdom rests in your care." Then Merlin and Sir Ulfius departed, leaving the baby to grow under the guidance of a righteous knight who would teach many things to the boy who would be called Arthur. Uther Pendragon, king of the Britons, had handed over his firstborn son to Merlin. Sure of his succession, Uther longed to secure his power. The king remembered Merlin's old prophecy. It spoke of a great monarch who would unite all lands under one ruler, bringing peace and prosperity to Brittany. Uther wanted brave allies to become that king, so he gathered the best and most honorable warriors in the realm. Merlin led Uther to a coastal area with strange rock formations. The ancients claimed the gods established the base of a future kingdom here. "On these strong foundations, I will build my capital," he said. He decided to call this fortress Camelot. Demanding vast labor and funds from his vassals, Uther began construction on a grand fortress. The work moved along but would take years to complete. Not everyone was pleased. Some nobles hated providing these tributes, and certain clergymen despised placing a new capital on ground held sacred by the Celtic faith. Besides inner strife, Saxon invasions threatened Uther's hold on power. The king called on the armies of his allies to fend off the Saxons, unaware that some planned to betray him. During a war council, Uther revealed his strategy for the coming clash, knowing that brute force alone would fail against the hardy Saxons. At dawn, Uther led his men from the front, tempting the Saxon commander to direct all his warriors at him. He knew if he fell, Brittany would also fall. The king expected his hidden troops to flank the Saxons on his command, but the orders weren't carried out. Uther had been deceived. Even so, he and his loyal knights fought with fierce courage. The king was badly hurt, but refused to surrender. The Saxon chief soon realized conquering Uther would cost too many men's lives, so he withdrew for another day. Uther and his forces rejoiced, but the victory was bittersweet. "Bring me the royal sword! Charge!" Seeing the king so vulnerable, the treacherous nobles tried to dethrone him. "Run, my king! We will hold them off!" Uther headed for London, bleeding and pursued by traitors. He collapsed from his wounds, thinking all was lost, until Merlin arrived. "Defend your sword, for the destiny of all England depends on it." Summoning his last bit of strength, Uther raised his blade and drove it into a stone. "You will never claim this sword, and without it, you shall never claim my throne." Countless men attempted to pull that sword free, but they said only the rightful king could succeed. Those who tried to seize Brittany's throne were killed by rivals. For years, the sword waited in the stone for the rightful king. Many winters passed since Uther Pendragon's fall, leaving Brittany without a ruler. Right after Christmas, all nobles were invited by the Archbishop of London to honor God. But most were more drawn to the tournaments and knightly contests after the Mass. Knights from all over Brittany joined in, including Sir Ector, his son Sir Kay, and young Arthur, the squire who was Sir Kay's foster brother. The best knights had permission to test the sword still lodged in the stone. Anyone able to pull it free would be the new king of Brittany. Newcomer knights started with sword duels, which were less glorious than jousting, but it was a step to prove themselves. During one such duel, Sir Kay's blade broke. "Arthur, hurry to our tent and find my spare sword, or I'll be disqualified." Arthur raced to their camp, but stumbled upon the sword in the stone on the way. He didn't know its background and continued running. Inside the tent, he found only the sword's empty sheath. He had foolishly left the spare sword at home. Recalling that mysterious weapon, he headed back, unaware he was being observed. Arthur approached the legendary sword and, not recognizing its significance, grabbed the hilt. To his surprise, it came free effortlessly, and he stood in awe of its fine craftsmanship. But time was short, so he sped off to Sir Kay. "About time. I thought you weren't coming back." Sir Kay was shocked to see the royal seal on that blade. "Hurry, we must return or risk being expelled." "Look, he has the sword of Brittany." Crowds surrounded Sir Kay, astonished. "How did you get it?" "I pulled it out. Thus, I'm the new king of Brittany." Sir Ector then came with the archbishop. "Swear by God that it was you who drew the sword?" Kay, feeling guilt, couldn't lie in front of his father and the archbishop. "I did not speak truly. It was Arthur who took it." Most knights doubted a mere boy could accomplish that, so they demanded proof. Arthur replaced the sword in the stone. A huge knight pushed him aside, trying in vain to pull it out. Others lined up to try, but none succeeded. "Let the boy attempt it again." The wizard, known by everyone, appeared. "What's that devil's servant doing here?" "If I earned a coin each time I heard that, I'd be the wealthiest man in Brittany." The spectators urged them to let Arthur try once more. The young squire pulled the blade out again with ease, leaving everyone speechless. Just because he withdrew the blade, does that make him king? His right isn't just in removing an old sword, it's in his blood. He is Uther Pendragon's firstborn. Absurd! The wizard's words mean nothing to us. But mine do. Although I dislike this peculiar old man, what he says is the truth. Sir Ulfius, a knight well respected in those parts and formerly Uther's loyal companion, confirmed the story. Sir Ector turned to Arthur with a look of wonder. "Merlin placed you in my arms. I called you my son then, and with pride, I now call you my king." Knights, priests, and common folk knelt before the boy, who hardly grasped what was happening. On Pentecost, Arthur was crowned King of Brittany by the Archbishop of London, amidst joyful cries of "Long live the King!" He named Sir Ulfius his chief knight, and Merlin stayed on as his counselor. Thus began the rule of King Arthur. Upon his coronation, Arthur, like his father, faced fierce resistance from certain nobles who questioned his legitimacy. Some regarded him a lowborn, others simply refused to bow to someone so young. Still, Arthur had loyal supporters, but more allies were needed to bring peace across the realm. Sir Ulfius, my father had close friendships with rulers across the sea, correct? Yes, sire. He understood the value of a true friend during troubled times. I need to rebuild these bonds. With our kingdoms united, we can stand firmer against our enemies. You will lead a mission to negotiate a defensive alliance on my behalf. As you wish, Your Majesty. Sir Ulfius went across the channel to see King Bors of Gaul and his brother, King Ban of Benwick, sometimes called Little Britain. King Ban welcomed the proposal for an alliance with Arthur. His wife was expecting a child, and he wanted his newborn to inherit a secure and powerful realm. That child would become a famed knight, Lancelot. With his allies' troops joining him, Arthur overpowered the defiant nobles, bringing order to Brittany. Once the major unrest was quelled, he stabilized his throne. A fresh wave of hope spread throughout England. With Merlin's counsel, Arthur ordered the revival of Camelot's construction, one of King Uther's unfinished dreams. The demanding project symbolized a brighter new age in England. Fortune spread across the land, and Arthur's popularity soared. The civil wars had left many knights wandering aimlessly. Former rebels, landless warriors, and knights without lords traveled the roads with no purpose. These men were dangerous, with nothing left to lose. One day, Arthur rode out with Merlin, speaking of Brittany's future, when they spotted a wounded knight. He was Sir Griflet, newly anointed, sent to defeat a strange knight haunting the region. He was badly hurt and barely stayed upright. Dear God, who did this to you? It was a giant knight dressed in dark armor. He attacks any who try to pass through the woods he claims as his. Merlin, do you know who would do such a thing? In these parts, only one man matches that description, Pellinore. Once a king, now landless. Even without his kingdom, he remains dangerous. I'll handle him. Take care of Sir Griflet. Arthur raced into the forest, ignoring Merlin's plea to avoid that clash. Inside the forest, Arthur noticed numerous shields hanging from branches. He recognized some as belonging to outstanding knights, all bested by Pellinore. At the end of that grim display stood the Black Knight, an intimidating figure. This way is closed. Turn around or regret it. Arthur wore no sigil showing he was king, which suited him. I came to avenge Sir Griflet and clear this path once and for all. Then so be it, but don't think you'll live to tell. They charged and collided fiercely, each jousting with unmatched strength. Finally, a worthy opponent. I'm tired of unskilled knights who should still be squires. They struck again, their fight evenly matched. Arthur, though experienced, had never met such a masterful knight, and his confidence grew. On their third pass, Pellinore's lance found a gap in Arthur's armor and pierced his shoulder. You seem like one of those knights who quits at the first small wound. Arthur's pride stung, and he drew the royal sword. They clashed in a brutal sword fight, but even while injured, Arthur showed remarkable bravery. Pellinore landed a devastating strike that snapped Arthur's blade and battered his helmet. Knocked from his mount, Arthur was caught in the stirrup and dragged as his horse galloped away. Gravely wounded, he passed out. When he woke, he saw the loveliest young woman ever. He thought he must have died and seen an angel. Are you an angel? Your time hasn't come yet. I am Lady Guinevere, daughter of Leodegrance. Elsewhere, the Black Knight returned home deep in the forest, where his greatest treasure resided, his wife and his youngest son. The boy was gifted by the Holy Spirit and would one day be known as Percival. Arthur healed from his injuries, but he mourned the loss of his father's sword. Without it, he feared the crown would be more vulnerable. Don't fret, my king. Good might follow from bad. What good can come after such a loss? The sword of Brittany served its purpose by bringing you this far, and now we seek a blade that will guide you to your greatest deeds. Arthur and Merlin traveled to a misty lake, where Merlin chanted in the old tongue of Brittany. Arthur noticed the wind intensify as Merlin's voice rose. The gale whipped the fog away, revealing a surreal sight. A woman's arm rising from the lake, gripping a sword above the water. Whose arm is that, holding such a fine blade? She is one of Avalon's lake maidens, holders of ancient magic. I thought Avalon was only a legend. That's what the clergy wants everyone to believe. At that moment, a figure addressed them. Finally, Merlin, I thought you wouldn't return. Greetings, Viviane. Who are you? You look almost not of this world. I am Viviane, Lady of Avalon and leader of the Lake Maidens. We share the same land, even if it may not seem so. With your backing, I hope to safeguard the future of Albion. You appear genuine. We pledge our support. She pointed to the sword. Its name is Excalibur. It belongs to the one who will bring a golden era to Brittany. If you believe that's you, row out to the maiden. She'll judge your worth. If you fail, she'll drag you under and you will not return. Arthur bravely steered a boat over the water, reaching out from the bow for the sword. Just as he seized it, the lady's hand clasped his wrist, her eyes burning like embers. She pulled him below the surface and murmured, "Make yourself worthy of that sword." Terrified, Arthur bobbed up with the sword in his grasp. He felt a rush of power unlike anything he had experienced. I hope you're right about this new champion, Merlin. Our land's fate rests on him. When Arthur returned to shore, Viviane had gone. So, what now, my king? Now I will have my reckoning. Arthur and Merlin returned to confront the Black Knight. The king dismounted, challenging Pellinore to a sword fight, as he held no lance. Pellinore, legendary for his sword skills, agreed at once. They exchanged blows, and Arthur, though previously beaten, now fought with renewed skill and courage. In a swift move, Arthur knocked Pellinore's sword from his grip. Defenseless, Pellinore had to yield. That weapon is incredible, and you fight like a different knight. My name is Pellinore, dethroned king of Lyssonise. If you spare me, my family and I will swear allegiance. I know you once rose against me, but I'm setting a new course for Brittany, one of unity. I'll be honored to have such an accomplished knight with me. Having made peace with Pellinore, Arthur rode away with Merlin. What do you think of your new blade, my king? It's magnificent. But tell me, do you prefer the sword or the sheath? The sheath is pretty, but of course the sword is more precious. You're wrong. While the sword is wonderful, the scabbard is more valuable. How so? That scabbard is enchanted, and as long as you carry it, you cannot die in battle. Even if you're gravely wounded, you will not perish. Guard it well. Back at Camelot, Arthur found his men assembled by Sir Ulfius. One of Arthur's allies was in danger, and only the king could aid him. The kingdom of Camelard, an old friend of the Pendragons, was in a dire spot. King Leodegrance had no son, meaning whoever wed Princess Guinevere would inherit Camelard. Welsh lords and the Duke of Northumbria aimed to force Guinevere into marriage, uniting her lands with theirs. With the backing of King Ryans, the Duke gave an ultimatum. Hand over the princess, or see the fortress destroyed and its people enslaved. King Leodegrance pleaded for help, but knew his small force couldn't hold out. He prayed Arthur would come after receiving his request. Arthur raced to Camelard. His arrival caught the coalition off guard. Though they fought bravely, the enemy fell before the king's mighty knights. After easily overwhelming the initial assault, Arthur suggested a solution. You men, like my own, are children of Brittany. No need to soak this soil with our blood. Let champions meet in single combat, and we'll trust God's will. The Duke, known as a skilled jouster, agreed. Princess Guinevere signaled her champion, and Arthur recognized her features. She was the woman who had once saved him. Guinevere tied her scarf to Arthur's lance as a lucky charm. The knights galloped, their spears striking with tremendous force. The Duke was unseated, landing heavily on the ground. Arthur dismounted, kneeling by the fallen Duke, choking on blood. In a final motion, Arthur raised Guinevere's scarf in triumph, and the opposing forces retreated. He apologized to the princess for returning her scarf stained with blood, but thanked her for its luck. King Leodegrance enthusiastically embraced Arthur, promising him any reward he desired. I beg your pardon, but what I desire most is what those barbarians also sought, your daughter's hand. She is the loveliest woman these lands have seen. Not since the days of heroes like Achilles has a woman drawn so many admirers or caused such trouble. However, there is no man more worthy than you, my king, to marry our Helen of Brittany. No one will challenge you for her. Leodegrance offered his daughter to Arthur, and another wonderful gift followed. Do you know what that is, my king? A table? Yes, but not just any table. It stands for your father's dream that the greatest knights of this realm will gather around it. Under your guidance, they will seek to bring justice, compassion, and peace to Brittany. Arthur was moved by his late father's vision and vowed to make it a reality. He bid farewell to his bride and her father, saying he would meet them the next summer in his new castle to celebrate the royal wedding. When summer came at last, Camelot stood finished after countless years of labor. The city dazzled, a beacon across Brittany, a place of justice, honor, and goodwill. In a world marred by cruelty, Camelot shone like a gem. The streets were filled for the day of Arthur's wedding to Princess Guinevere of Camelard. Arthur watched his bride walk down the aisle, convinced he was marrying the most beautiful woman on earth. The crowd admired her, except for Merlin, who sensed that such beauty might one day lead to misfortune. The Archbishop of Canterbury blessed their vows, and a new Queen of Brittany was crowned. Subjects rejoiced, praying for the couple's happiness and for the birth of a royal heir. Celebrations raged all weekend, banquets, street feasts, and jousting games. That same weekend, Arthur selected the men who would sit around the round table. Leodegrance joined, as did Sir Ulfius, Sir Kay, Sir Gawain, and many other distinguished knights. Since the table had no head, they all sat as equals, pledged to act with justice and courage, be it wartime or peacetime. They served as examples for both knights and ordinary people, traveling the length of Britain to challenge wrongdoers, defend the weak, and uphold the law. Their triumphs lit a path of glory, suggesting the golden era that Arthur had promised was near. Every knight dreamed of earning a place at the round table, fighting beside Arthur and his legendary champions. After this famous Order of the Round Table was formed, some years went by until one knight rose to stand apart from the rest, Lancelot. His presence would forever change the fate of Arthur's kingdom. When Arthur first claimed the throne, he faced many revolts from nobles who disliked a young king. Yet he also counted on allies like King Ban of Benwick. Arthur's realm was stabilized, thanks in part to Ban's support. Back in his homeland across the water, King Ban reunited with his newborn son, soon christened Galahad, but forever remembered as Lancelot. King Ban then found himself in dire danger. A Frankish king named Claudas, driven by ambition and tyranny, threatened Ban and his brother, King Bors. They went to war. The brothers led their troops to meet Claudas's sizable forces in Gaul. Ban and Bors had with them their newly knighted sons, Lionel and Bors the younger. A massive battle broke out. Arthur's allies gained a costly victory, but their army was nearly destroyed. King Bors fell, and Lionel and Bors the younger were captured. King Ban returned to his stronghold with a few survivors. He knew Claudas still had plenty of men. Even though Ban's fortress could fend off a siege for a while, it couldn't hold forever. But he had one final plan. "My beloved, we must flee to Arthur's land where you and our son will be safe. Then Arthur's army can help us retake our kingdom from Claudas." Before Claudas circled the fortress, Ban escaped with his wife Elaine and baby in hand. Deep in the forest, Ban, who was a Christian yet still prayed to the old Breton gods, begged for help on this perilous journey. Suddenly, Ban was struck by a projectile that knocked him from his mount. "You won't slip away this time, King Ban." It was Claudas, exulting in his victory. Ban begged Elaine to ride on, saving their son. Elaine fled with the baby to a muddy lakeshore. Claudas's soldiers drew near. Her horse got stuck, leaving her desperate and out of time. At that moment, a graceful figure appeared from the lake's waters. Introducing herself as Viviane, the Lady of the Lake, she urged Elaine to hand her the baby. Viviane moved across the mud without sinking, though Elaine wept as she released her son. Cradling the smiling child, the Fairy of Avalon declared he would now be known as Lancelot of the Lake. King Ban was slain, and Claudas seized his throne. Heartbroken, Elaine entered a convent and waited for Viviane's promise that her son would return grown into a powerful knight who would reclaim what was his. The Lady of the Lake took King Ban's baby boy to Avalon, a mythical domain sustained by ancient magic. Lush and secretive, Avalon's location was unknown to outsiders. This was the realm of the Lake Maidens, women of remarkable power. Viviane sensed the child's glorious fate, renaming him Lancelot of the Lake. Morgana, King Arthur's half-sister, was also in Avalon, studying to become its future ruler. She felt the strong aura around the boy. Lancelot grew up among Avalon's mysteries, living an unusual childhood. By age 10, he was entrusted to a new guardian, Sir Peleus. Saved by Viviane from a mortal wound, Peleus owed his life to Avalon's enchantments. Peleus proved a superb mentor and skilled swordsman. He taught Lancelot mastery of many weapons and the arts of mounted combat. Lancelot absorbed every lesson eagerly, practicing until he reached flawless skill. Before long, the student outdid his teacher, and Peleus took pride in seeing the child become a splendid knight. At 17, Lancelot was given shining silver armor by Viviane. Meanwhile, King Arthur was riding home with Sir Bedivere and Sir Gawain after defeating a band of raiders. They spotted Lancelot riding toward them. "Halt! I'll move you by force if needed. Give way, boy." "Boy? If people still call me that, then perhaps I must prove otherwise by unhorsing another knight. Don't say I didn't warn you." They charged. Lancelot landed a blow that knocked Gawain straight out of his saddle. Arthur was stunned. Sir Gawain was a champion jouster. "Knight, are you just as good with a sword?" "My honesty demands I say yes, otherwise I'd be lying." "Then test yourself against me. Don't worry, I only want to see your skill." Their swords clashed, both men revealing great technique. "You fight amazingly, my lord, but your speed is slowed by age." "Age? You audacious youngster." Lancelot's teasing upset Arthur, who struck out rashly. This opened chances for Lancelot, who took advantage and disarmed the king. "Well done, young knight. You've won." Lancelot paused when he realized Arthur carried Excalibur, the fabled sword watched over by the lake maidens. "That's Excalibur. Then you must be the king." "Your name, knight? And how do you know this sword?" "I am Lancelot of the Lake. I saw Excalibur in Avalon when I was just a child." Glad to hear of the knight's background, Arthur invited him to join the round table, for he had never encountered anyone so gifted. Lancelot followed him to Camelot, where he was knighted. The king introduced him to his queen, and the moment their gazes met, they were both spellbound. Young, attractive Lancelot and the realm's most beautiful queen felt a mutual enchantment. Arthur took Excalibur and officially dubbed him Sir Lancelot of the Lake. But before sitting at the round table, Lancelot left Camelot in search of further glory, determined to prove his name in every corner of Arthur's kingdom. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos.